Boy, I cannot think. Uh, I'm running out. I'm running out of stuff to. Well, you can find us. You can find us on there on and all of social media. You can find us there, and we're glad that you joined us this morning. And again, we are live on Facebook, so you can tune in there on Facebook. Also, um, what else? What am I missing? Seems like I'm missing something. But anyway, we got a lot great show I want to talk about today. Ultimately, the conversation will be about um, providing for the pastor's family. You know, after the pastor passes away, what can be done to provide for the pastor's family, or better yet, is the church even obligated to do so? Um, is the church obligated to take care of the family if a pastor passes? And should should provision for the family be a part of a pastor's succession plan? If there is a succession plan in place, should care for the family be a part of that? So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about, as much as I hate to talk about this, um, POTUS and this continued spat with the NFL and players kneeling, and that, as well as a couple other topics of interest. We touched on the Catholic Church and the Roman Catholic Church and the diocese or in Pennsylvania, and the horrible things that have been uncovered and revealed by state prosecutors regarding sexual abuse and misconduct by the clergy. Max Lucado um, wrote an article or made discussion about that in the article, and you can find that in the Christian Post. We'll talk about that, and um, want to talk about um, um, what else? Jeez, I cannot think of it. I thought I had myself all together, but anyway, we'll we'll be talking about that. But that primary thing that we will be discussing is about the issue with the late Archbishop Roy E. Brown and the things that's surrounding his widow and the church, Pilgrim Church there in New York. So we'll talk about that. Let's go to prayer. Go into the Lord in prayer real quick. Father, we thank you for this day. We bless you. We honor you. We ask that you will just lead us in the way we should go regarding this conversation. Be thou our guide. Let the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable. God, my strength and redeemer. We ask this in your son's name. Amen. All right, so let's kick this off real quick with a couple of headlines. Most of these headlines that I'm getting are coming from the Christian Post, and also from the old Black Church blog page. You can find that. Ann Brock, she does a wonderful job with that website, and so you can go visit those sites to get more information on some of the topics that I'll be discussing today. I don't plan to have a long show, but just want to give my insight on some of these things that are happening. Um, and so I want to lead off with this story. Um, I'm still finding this appalling to me how um, many white Christian evangelicals are basically standing behind Donald Trump. No matter right now, it seems like that he can do no wrong in their eyes, and I think about the same people throughout the tenure of President Obama, throughout his administration over the course of the 8 years that he was president, how little respect that they had for him regarding his profession of Christian faith. There were pockets of them who were who were always questioning his faith, whether he was a true Christian, and there's still some who would tell you that he is a Muslim and that he's never been a Christian. And and um, when it came to morality, there were some who questioned his morality because of there were things like Benghazi. There were other kind of scandals. I think, particularly with the IRS and how the IRS seemed to be targeting more conservative leaning organizations, and they used that, and they said that he was levying, using that as a weapon. He was weaponizing them against those agencies, against conservatives. And you had persons like Sean Hannity leaving the cause, um, who there are plenty others. All right, and a lot of these Christian evangelicals were joining in in this protest against him to some degree. And of course, the issue with the gay marriage, same-sex marriage, and um, his reversal on that, how he was opposed and then he supported, and then you saw how it became, how it played out in the court system. But when it comes to personal morality, they never once praised him for how he carried himself in the office of president. They never once really praised him, how he to our knowledge, he had no extramarital affairs. To our knowledge, he had no personal impediment morally. I'm not sure. That's not to say that he was perfect morally, but that's just simply to say that there was no public demonstration, or the media maybe did a good job covering for him. We don't know. But what we do know is that we have a president in office right now who does not have moral imperative of any sort. And I say that as a flawed human person myself. I say that as as a pastor who since being in ministry continues to make mistakes personally, morally. We all do that. So no, there is no casting judgment. But I can say this, definitely. I can say this, that our current president, President Donald J. Trump, seems to have little to no concern about his personal morality and how it comes across to our individuals. He doesn't care what people think of him. And he stated publicly he sees no need to ask for forgiveness for anything, because he just doesn't. He doesn't. He I don't know how to say it directly, but he sees no need to ask forgiveness, and he sees no need to be forgiven. So he'll just do whatever he says. He does do whatever he does, say whatever he says, and whatever happens. However the chips fall, it falls. And the fact that he can be personally engaged with individuals, and that's where the moral imperative. You talking about. I read about Andrew Jackson. I've read about Richard Nixon. I read about several other presidents, both Democrat, Republican, who, personal vendettas they had, and sometimes, particularly, John Adams. John Adams was probably the first president who, uh, went after his detractors, or his those who contested him, and he got a very dangerous sedition act from that, and there were others who followed in like manner, and there were some who weren't just as public, perhaps, as our current president is. But reading the article in Christian Post about Jerry Falwell Jr. and seeing how Jerry Falwell in this particular article cites scripture in defense of the recent what his lawyer, Trump's lawyer, has has stated that he was instructed by President Trump to pay off pay off money in order to influence the election, if I understand it correctly. Now, in doing so, that is not only a moral violation, but it's also a a constitutional and law violation. So it's going to be interesting how that is followed up, if that how that plays out. I call I call this administration, this presidency, I call it living reality TV, unscripted reality television that unfortunately we all are forced to be an audience to. We can't change the channel. Of course, I'm speaking in jest, but that's how it seems sometimes, and that the drama the drama that's created through this presidency in just this short time. We can't celebrate what he is doing, the accomplishments that have happened under his administration that we can celebrate, like low employment for in the black community and 700,000 jobs in the black community. The historic civil rights trail network that he established in his administration, and I'm just speaking particularly to those things that pertain to the black community and other things that he has done, that have been very, very positive. But the same day, that's the funny thing, that's the crazy thing. The same day that he can roll out, sign an executive order or get some legislation that's gets through, if they have passed it, he comes back and dismantles all of that with something negative, something petty, and he knows that he has the confidence of the evangelical base to back him up and support him. And so this article states that Liberty University president Jerry Falwell Jr., who's the son of Jerry Falwell, who founded Liberty University and was the longtime leader of the moral majority from the late 70s and early 80s, and so forth and so on. But anyway, he quoted the Bible and blamed Attorney General Jeff Sessions in response to the news that former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen pled guilty to paying a porn star at the direction of Donald Trump. So you can read about that in national news about Cohen and what he said. But this is the disturbing thing. In response to this is what the article says in the Christian Post. In response to the news, Falwell blamed Sessions, and he said, "By their fruits you shall know them." Today we saw the fruits of Jeff Sessions, but it's too little too late. The AG sowed the wind, but he will reap the whirlwind in November. Right? So, and then this was followed by a quote from Eric Erickson, who is a conservative social commentator, and he said that even the devil can quote scripture. You're using this line to attack Jeff Sessions while cheering on a man who cheated on his pregnant wife with porn stars. This is just crazy. This is how bad. This is how bad some in the evangelical Christian community have gotten. This is how delusion. This is how much Kool-Aid they have gotten. This is how much they are thriving in the fact that they have reclaimed the presidency, and they're hoping that this will spill over into midterm elections and that they remain control of Congress and keep the country red for a little bit. But it's the fact that this person, this very influential person, there was a fly last week when I was doing the show, and there's a fly in here today, and it's just getting on my nerves. I mean, I don't have nothing to wash it with. And every time I try to reach for it, like right now, I'm trying to silently try to get it, and boom, it's gone. I can't. It's like it see me pick it up, and it, man, I need the old grandmas who had those quick hands with the fly swatters. I'm sorry. All right. I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna do better. As I was saying, it shows it shows the depth of how hungry for power they are. How they're not showing the love of Christ. They're showing the fact that they want power. In some degrees, there's some who are further right, who are of dominionist mentality, a kingdom dominionist ideology, which basically means that the kingdom of God should be reflected here in the earth in government, and that the Christians should be ruling government, and they should be influencing policy. And I agree that we should be influencing policy, but their strand of policy is what some have a problem with. But that's neither here nor there. That's a discussion for another time. But to hear a person who is the president of a university, that's supposed to be a Christian university, where thousands of students attend at every level, bachelor's and master's and doctorate, and while these students are there, most who come in the bachelor for bachelor programs, they're getting this reinforcement of this negative ideology of Christianity, that the true Christians reflect them. They look like them, they behave like them, and they have, they show they show themselves as true Christians by opposing anything that seems to be progressive, and anything that is anti-liberal is pro-Christianity. And I'm gonna say it like this: I'm like Chris Rock. Chris Rock did a comedy special. This is fly. Chris Rock did a comedy special. I don't know how long ago it was, but in the comedy special, he had one segment of y'all. Do y'all see this fly? He had one segment of the of his routine where he talked about being liberal and being conservative, and he said, on some things I'm liberal and some things I'm conservative. And I think as a person who is center right, I'm center right. I identify as center right, and y'all see me doing all this. That's because this fly is stiff. I ain't got no food in here. I have no food, so I don't know. I don't know why he trying to get famous. Fly want to be famous. But I believe, there are things socially that some Christians will be more conservative on, and we know some of those areas and those social issues that most Christians are conservative on. And then there's some things that are liberal on, I'm finding more Christians becoming liberal when it comes to marijuana and decriminalizing it, particularly for those of us who are African American. And we know that, in many cases, there's a minimum sentence when it comes to drug laws, and so you have a small amount of marijuana, you can go to jail for a long time, whether you had a record or not. And so there are those of us who are a little more liberal when it comes to things like that, in perspective of criminal justice reform and sentencing reform, right? But there are things that we should be liberal about, and there's some things that we should be conservative about. Everything is not to be conservative, because you ain't conservative in your life about everything. There's some things that you will choose to do that you will not do. There's some scriptures you choose not to follow intentionally because you don't want it to apply to you. You don't think it should apply to you. But this is the kind of environment that some evangelical Christians, not all, but some, are creating. they are defending this person, the president, by any means. We have to stand behind him. We have to defend. He's a godsend. And my thing has always been, and I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit. If you're going to say one president is a godsend, God ordained, you have to say that about all of them, because they have to realize they weren't the only ones praying. There were liberals who were praying Hillary Clinton would win. There were persons who weren't liberal praying Hillary Clinton would win. There were 13 persons running for the United States, for president of the United States in 2016. And I'm quite sure all of them, if they had some type of faith belief, especially if they were Christian, were praying that they would win. But the outcome is the outcome. If we're going to say God ordained for Donald Trump to be president in this hour, we have to question. And I know a lot of people use the scripture about Darius and Cyrus and whatever, and how, in Isaiah, I believe Isaiah 45, don't give me the line, but they use the example of how Cyrus was outside and became ruler, and God used Cyrus to do whatever he did. And I would not have a problem with that if President Trump did not have the moral affect that he has on this country. And I'm not talking about those persons who say they're suffering from Trump derangement or whatever they're calling it. I can't think of it. It's some kind of thing that people are they're saying that people are having because of the Trump. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying that what I'm saying, and I probably already spent too much time talking about this, is that the evangelical Christians have to, those who are standing firm supporting President Trump, you have to come to this very, very serious point of what would be the last straw. What would it take for you to cry out against him? And I'm not just talking about, I'm not talking about voting Republican or anything like that. I'm talking about what would it take for you to say that you demand that he live up to your criteria for scripture, your criteria for leadership. If you're a pastor and you say you have to be in leadership, you have to have the utmost moral capacity, and you see that failing in your president, you should demand that he fall in line or vote him out. You can't just support him just because he's the president and allow it. We know he's a liar. That's a given. We know he is a liar. We know he's insensitive at best when it comes to issues of race and culture. Insensitive at best. I dare not say he's a racist. I'm not going to go there. He may have persons who have racist ideas surrounding him, but he is definitely insensitive at the very least, and he is very, very, very petty. Except when it comes to persons he admire, like Vladimir Putin, and others. So I rambled about that. I'm sorry. Y'all can, if you want to leave some comments, feel free to leave some comments there and share your thoughts and whatever. I know I appreciate that all the time. But I did not intend to spend that much time talking about that, because that is plenty of stuff to talk about. Let me go ahead, and I should spend more time talking about Aretha than I talked about him, and that's how backward I am this morning. Y'all forgive me, I'm backwards. So we honor the legacy of Aretha Franklin. Her passing last week was, as I posted on my social media, was a tremendous loss. And I believe there's we lost this great era of, we're losing We haven't lost a lot, all of them, but we're losing. We still got Smokey. We still got a Patty. We still got um, uh, who else? Stevie. Thank goodness we still got Stevie Wonder. We still got a lot of great persons, musicians, and caliber from that generation who are still with us, and I hope they stay with us long. But funeral arrangements have been made for Aretha Franklin, and her funeral will be August the 31st, I believe, in the city of Detroit. And I learned just yesterday that the Reverend Dr. Jasper Williams Jr. will be the eulogist, and I tell you, I'm happy about that. Um, little 30 years ago, Jasper Williams Jr. preached her father's funeral, the Reverend Dr. C.L. Franklin, and I watched that funeral. My daddy had that funeral. I don't want to say my daddy had an older preacher that I was around had a videotape of that funeral, and I never forget going over his house watching it on video. Um, and I had no idea who C.L. Franklin was or who Jasper Williams Jr. was. I just knew that that was some kind of funeral, and I've seen it several times since then. Particularly Williams' eulogy. And if y'all don't know anything about Jasper Williams Jr., shame on you. Jasper Williams Jr. is pastor of Salem Church in Atlanta, and a very, very, he's in the twilight of his life, but that man has not slowed down. I heard him preach not too long ago at oh Lord, where was it? Anyway, I heard him preach not too long ago, and he has the same thunder and the same type of hoop as a yin and young man. He was the hooper I aspired to be. He used to have those midnight hooping services back in the day, and like I said, he was the hooper I aspired to be. Every black preacher aspires to be kind of like that. But anyway, I digress. So he will be preaching the funeral, and I think it's going to be well attended, of course. But continue to pray for her family. And I came across either a YouTube video or an article where it says she didn't have a will in place. I don't know how true that is, but someone said that she didn't have a will in place, and so there's going to be who knows what kind of fight. Now she was well. She wasn't broke. She had money. It was just a matter of planning, I suppose. I don't know, but I hope it ain't gonna be too big of a problem once after she in the ground. That could be it. Anyway, I'm gonna take a quick break, and when I come back on the other side of this break, we will talk about the topic of the day: how to avoid the pitfalls of of a pastor's passing, and all of that. So let me get through this break real quick. Y'all gonna still see me, but I gotta take a break for the radio. All right, welcome back to Zero today. Again, I'm your humble host, Pastor Lorenzo Neal. Um, I want to give you an opportunity to support to this program. Been doing this program for 8 years now, and we've been able to stay healthy doing this program. And I've enjoyed doing this program as long as I have been able to. But now you can support us on Patreon. So you can go to my Patreon page, patreon.com, Lorenzo T. Neal, and sign up, become a patron. There are three tiers you can do for as little as $1 a month. You can support, and whatever tier you do, there's a benefit in that you can get products we'll be offering, and certain things, videos and things that I won't do on the show, articles that won't be posted to my blog and stuff like that. So you can get that. So go check my page out, support me, and subscribe to the show. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Zera Radio, on Twitter. Excuse me, the blog Zera Network on Facebook. Go there and like the page. We need a lot of likes. And support us as best you can on Patreon. We appreciate you for that. So let's get into the topic of the day. If you're not familiar with this story, in June of 2018, Archbishop Roy E. Brown, who was the presiding prelate of the Pilgrim Assemblies worldwide or something to that nature, Pilgrim Assemblies, passed away. He started that fellowship, what was Pilgrim Baptist Church, in 1966. He was the pastor there, and then he took it to a whole nother level, and shifted it from Baptist to an apostolic type of Reformation, and he grew that church dramatically. And in 1990, he was made a bishop, and then several years later, they made him Archbishop. That was a new one. And so he recently passed away, and his second wife, Paula, was his caregiver. They had been married for a little over 20 years, I believe, I understand it correctly. But she was by his side till he passed away, and they lived in a $2 million home there in the New York City area. But they were well off. But he died, and when he died, apparently there was she lived there, and I guess they gave her adequate time to live there. And then all of a sudden, she gets an eviction notice to move out, evacuate, to leave the property within 10 days. And somehow it got leaked and made public. And so she's been getting sympathy, because here is the widow of this pastor who has built this church and built this organization, and she is being kicked out, as some have said, being kicked out or evicted from their home. Now, the way that it's recorded, you can find that, and again, you can go to the Old Black Church blogspot, that blog there. Sister Ann Brock, she has a post of this, and you can find it there. But now the church is still called Pilgrim Baptist Church, even though it's been apostolic leaning. But anyway, so they give her a 10-day notice to be out of the house. Now, she has lived in the home with her husband for 22 years, if not long, for however long they've been married. She's been living in that home. The question was, to whom does the home belong? Does it belong to the church? Does it belong to the pastor? And it's clear in court records that the property belongs to the church. And so they put the evacuation up. The owner and landlord of the property, of the home, is Pilgrim Baptist Church, and it's entitled to immediate possession of the premises. And based on the fact that the person who had a license to live on the premises, that is the person of Bishop Brown, died, and the license expired upon his death. When he died, it went to the church, and that um, the pastor's widow, Paula Brown, had no right to occupy because the person who had the right to occupy was dead. And by virtue of the death of Roy E. Brown, her occupancy in the premises is without permission of the landlord. Now, I understand church politics, and now they've had a pastor. Now, he hasn't been actively pastoring at the church since 2005. All right. So he hasn't been in active pastoral leadership. He's been ill, and he recovered, then he get ill again. So he turned over the duties of active pastoring to I forgot her name, Deborah somebody. But anyway, she's currently the pastor of the church. All right. Now, the question becomes, did they adequately and sufficiently provide her means and time to make arrangements for her to relocate? Now, and Sister Brown, the pastor's widow, has since come out and told her side of the story. And you can listen to, I think Larry Reed, who does a YouTube show, had an exclusive interview with her, and you can go there on his channel, Larry Reed, and you can hear her side of the story. Now, I say, and this is what I say, and this is the question I pose: should a pastor, particularly if they start their own church or if they're called to a church, now it's not applicable to pastors like myself in Reformations where we are appointed to churches, because there's a given. If we are appointed to a church, in particular in the Methodist Reformation, if we are appointed to a church, if we pass away during that appointment, our family can stay in that parsonage if they're living in the parsonage. If they're living in the church parsonage, they got 30 days, and that's it. But 9 times out of 10, there's been adequate preparation. The family is, the church is most times gracious. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. And but in churches like this is different, because most churches such as this, especially those that are founded by an individual, are autonomous, and they have a board. They have all these things that go into the play. And 9 times out of 10, the pastor does not plan far enough ahead to consider that they may die while pastoring, and they don't have a succession plan. So not only is there a fight to see who fills the pulpit, but there's also a fight to see who gets what. It's just a bigger family conflict. When somebody died, you know how it is. Papa died, daddy died, and family can't get along. Sister, brother didn't like each other, sisters didn't like each other, and they all want to split up everything. That same thing with church. Same thing with the church. But the question then becomes, should pastors prepare in their succession plan? Should they have something prepared for their family? Should churches be prepared? Should churches, as part of calling an individual to ministry, if a church calls them to pastor them, should, as part of their contract, churches prepare something for succession? I think about Eddie Long, and when Bishop Long passed away last year, you had his son, and then you had another bishop vying for the leadership. Now, Bishop Long had a succession plan and followed through with it, appointing the Bishop of Alabama to be the pastor of the main campus in Atlanta or Lithonia. Now, and it didn't last well. It didn't go well because not long into his tenure as pastor, um, the son was, making a power play. At least that's how it came across. That may not have been what it was, but that's how it came across to a lot of people, that it was a power play. And what ended up happening is that person who was designated as the successor to Bishop Long ended up resigning. And if I understand it correctly, Bishop Long's son is now in leadership. I could be mistaken about that, but I'm going on third, fourth, fifth party. But the problem I think a lot of churches have, those that are independent, those that are autonomous and congregational, is that if they get a young preacher, 9 times out of 10, they do not anticipate a young preacher dying early. If that preacher has a family and does not work outside of the church, so if they're in full-time ministry, they do not work outside of the church, and their sole income comes from the church, and their sole means of living comes from the church, then the question is, should that church be obligated to care for that family after the pastor dies? And, not to be mean, I think they should. I really do think they should, to a degree. And in the case of Bishop Brown's widow, now this woman should have had some type of plan. And I read somewhere that they gave her $100,000, and I can't validate that because again, this is not from a credible source that I know of. Now, this is from reading all of the comments, Facebook posts and all that stuff. So I can't validate or verify how accurate that is. But according to some, she was given money, and that money should have been sufficient to assist in her relocation. But it goes back to planning. The whole thing goes back to planning. I don't know the details of what they had for Bishop Brown while he was alive, what type of insurance, what type of annuity he may have had, what type of, I don't know any of that. Maybe he didn't have all of that. Maybe it was insufficient. Maybe he did. But one thing that they did make sure, and maybe he did this with the house so that save him money, by the church incorporating, by the church purchasing the home for him and owning the home. It's clear, states that they are the landlords. That means that if they were giving him a housing allowance, if they were whatever the arrangement was sufficient for him while he was alive, and they did not consider, at least it comes across that they did not consider the wife should stay there because it was the home of the church. It was the church's home for the church's pastor, and upon the demise of the pastor, whoever is now the new pastor, that's him get the house. Now, whether that happens or not, they may sell it and make a profit. They may allow the new pastor to move in, her family, and she live it up. But that's neither, I really don't know how to say that. But one thing I can say is that if you are a young pastor, and I'm speaking to myself in this too, if you are a young pastor, you need to prepare for everything. You are not guaranteed a long ministry. And I had to learn this the hard way. When I started paying into my annuity, when I began pastoring in AME Church, I didn't want to pay into it. I was paying the bare minimum. I was paying just enough that was required, the bare minimum. And I could have been paying more. And an older pastor told me, said, now, this is how the annuity works. You get in, you get out what you put in. And just because you're young, and I was just in my 20s and I hadn't even thought about it. Said, just because you're young now and your church think is a burden to give that towards your annuity, you have to remind them that you are not promised tomorrow. And at the time I was married, and they saw my value enough to step it up. They raised the amount for me. You know, I wasn't aware, you know, that they had done it until I got my report, and they said, "Well, we're raising it for you." And I'm like, "Oh, wow." But I felt bad because I hadn't thought it long term. And now, you know, I look and I see it like, oh my God, I'm 30 years away from 30, maybe 40. Yeah, 30 years away from retirement because we had to retire in our 70s. I'm just 30 years away from retirement. And if what I have now is all that I get, I'd be in trouble. And if I had a family, and I hope to have a family again soon, you know, I do hope that I get that. I want to make sure that the arrangements are there. Now, again, because of the system I'm in, that be covered. But I don't want. I had a friend and we talked about this the other day. I don't want. I don't want to be completely dependent on the church. So I'm starting to get out of the church for my entire livelihood, because we buried preachers and it's become a bad tradition. We would be at the funeral and every preacher would give $50 or $100 because 9 times out of 10 that preacher had insufficient funds for their own burial or the family's livelihood. And now we have the annuity and we have all of that, and we have other things in place so that those, you know, preachers can be taken care of and their families can be taken care of. Thank God for that. But there, you know, we were intentional in doing that. But there are a lot of churches who don't think that far ahead. There are a lot of young preachers who don't think that far ahead. You may not be at the same church for 30 years. I'm glad to know preachers who have been at the same church for 30 years. My home pastor has been at the church 30 plus years. The church that I grew up in, Riverside Baptist Church in Louisiana, he's been there 30 plus years. And in the 30 plus years, I'm sure, you know, they went from being an every other Sunday to a full-time Sunday church, and you know, I'm sure he's going to be taken care of. But young preacher, you got to start thinking ahead. You're not the likelihood of you having a mega ministry is very slim. You know, I'm grateful for preachers like Bishop Paul Morton, who was able to build the church at Greater St. Stephen up to this mega church, both campuses in Atlanta and New Orleans. I'm grateful for him. I'm grateful for young preachers like Jamal Bryant, who are, you know, who are very flourishing, who are thriving, have thriving ministries, you know, and things like that. Many others I can name. I can go down a list of older ministers. I think about Clay Evans in Chicago and what he did when he founded Fellowship Baptist Church and how he grew that, and now he's able to kind of, you know, he's passed the baton and he's able to, you know, he's in the twilight of his years and live comfortably. But think about all that he labored to get to that point. And now, you know, he's able to live and to rest and, you know, to kind of say, I've done my job. But we got to steal in young preachers that, yes, you can have a thriving social media ministry. Yes, you can have a thriving weekly attendance, but that ain't guaranteed. You know, folk will get mad at you and leave. You can be healthy and still have a health issue that can tear your ministry down. What will your family? What's going to happen to your family? You need to think ahead. And I'm forcing myself to do the same thing. You know, now that I'm pushing myself. I'm seeing a bigger picture. I'm seeing a bigger picture and a greater need for me to be concerned not only about myself but benevolence of my family, my extended family. And I think this is what should happen. A succession plan for pastoral succession, in my opinion, should include the family. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with the family? What are we going to do with his wives? With his wives, I mean his wife. What are we going to do with the children? What are we going to do to ensure that their quality of life does not have to come to an abbreviated halt, a sudden halt, that the quality of life can continue. It doesn't have to be on the same standard, but we need to ensure something. Young preachers, stop thinking about the here and now. Start thinking about the long term. And let me put it this way: if you think about the here and now, think about the here and now with the long term, the long goal in mind. Don't go through all of this work and labor in ministry and then you die a pauper or your family dies a pauper. Don't put in all the work, the prayers, the preaching, the traveling. Don't put in all of that. And if you have a family, if you have children, not think about them in the long term. Even if they are adults, when you're past, when you die, think about it. And I live right now where I live, is church housing is provided for me. And I'm having to force myself to get my credit right so I can purchase my own place so that I won't be reliant on the church. I'm challenging myself to develop extra streams of income because y'all know how it is. It's summertime and church giving is down. Church giving is down, but the reality is that that my annuity, what I get, what I'm planning to retire on, may be insufficient. Inflation may happen. I don't know. I don't know, but I should be prepared, and I need to have that in place now, and in place now, because should a medical emergency happen now, I already know my church as it stands now is incapable of providing. They can't pay the medical bills. They wouldn't be able to. And I need to be able, heck, that's probably most people, even with good insurance. not just from the Affordable Care Act, but with even the best insurance plans, medical bills can bankrupt you. So what am I saying? How should you avoid the pitfalls of a pastor's passing? First, plan. Be strategic in your planning. Be strategic in your planning. If you are a church and you are on a pastor's committee, you're on a pastor's search committee, get with that board and say, look, we need to make sure that we think ahead. If we're getting a young pastor, we need to be able to think ahead. If we want him to stay long term, what are we going to offer to him and his family, and how are we going to deal with that? If we have an older pastor and we have an aging pastor, okay, let's look into a succession plan. How are we going to, we don't want to kick him out, but we want to make him think, okay, who's going to follow me? If we got 10 preachers, we already know 10 preachers are going to be vying for that position. But those are some things that we should consider. Plan, be strategic. Second, be intentional. Be intentional with what you are planning. Pastors, be intentional in the way that you develop your ministry for the long term, so that when you may be at a church for 30 years, if you start pastoring at 20, 25, 30 years, you're just in your 50s, you're still young. You still have that's still a good time. That's still a good age. And you need to be considering that far ahead, things like that. Be intentional. Think about your family. Think about your obligations to your ministry, and think about, you know, you're not going to be able to hoop and holler and walk the pews within the next 15 years. Think about your family. What kind of quality of life do you want them to have now and after you're gone? Plan. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid to tell your board that you are planning, that you're thinking ahead, that you know the possibility of you dying is imminent. And they need to be prepared. You need to be prepared. The family needs to be prepared. Everybody needs to be, it needs to be a collaborative community effort. So you won't be left in dire straits. Your wife, your children won't be left in dire straits. The church won't be left in dire straits. Things like this shouldn't happen. It's preventable. I grieve for the widow of Bishop Brown. I do. But at least the church had their affairs in order. And we need to be, we need to be more accountable. We need to be as transparent, and we need to be concerned. This is a community. The church is a community of believers with the leader under the leadership of a shepherd pastor. And when we see it from that perspective, we understand the responsibility of the entire community to care for each other. We are a koinonia. We are a body of believers, and we need each other. So anyway, I gotta get out of here. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, I want to invite you to support me on Patreon. Uh, Go to patreon.com, Lorenzo T. Neal, and you can be a patron for me, and as low as $1 a month. Also, like the page. Still squatting at this fly. Like the page, like the broadcast. You can catch any broadcast archived on iTunes all the way back to 2010. You can catch them, and any other podcasts, you can find them there, and we appreciate that. Visit my webpage, Lorenzo T. Neal. You can read some of the articles that I have written and will be writing, and you can listen to some sermons. We just got that up, and we're going to be updating a little bit also. And also, if you hadn't got a copy, I still wanted you to get a copy of my book. I got a couple other things coming out soon. Thank you for your support. We got to get out of here. Appreciate all that you do. And as often we get a chance to do so, we invite you to join us until we make it over to the other side. We like what we do, and we're glad that we do it. And we hope that you enjoy it too. Appreciate all that you do. And I'm getting out of here. Bless you. God keep you. Bless you. All that stuff. Howdy. Bye. Hey.